I grew up in a house where my parents both had been to church in the past, but they uh, had that, I guess, that kind of a hippie ideal of letting their children choose their own path. And so when I was growing up, there was the odd Bible kicking around the house, but it never got read by my parents. And if I was curious about God, well, I was free to pick it up and read it for myself, which I tried doing several times as I was growing up, because I figured, hey, if this God guy is kind of important, then maybe I should find out about him. So I would pick up the Bible from time to time, and because I was a book reader, I thought maybe I should start at the beginning. And I read in the beginning, and I thought that was appropriate. Turned out, not so much. Starting in Genesis is great, but by the time you get to the middle part of Exodus, things start getting really dry for a 7, 8, 9-year-old boy. So I never really got very far attempting to start my spiritual journey myself. Growing up into junior high and high school, faced a little bit of, well, I can't say a little bit, it was quite a lot of bullying and things like that going on. I had moved several times as a elementary school student, so I never really had a chance to make strong friendship connections. So when I got to high school, things were pretty rough. Senior high was a fresh start coming out of junior high, and I made a new friend named a guy named Cal. Fun guy, liked to go hiking, liked to go fishing. It was good times to hang around with him. So one Sunday I give him a call. And I say, hey, you want to go fishing? And he says to me, I can't. I'm going to church today. I was like, oh, well, I'm not against church. I like hanging out with you. Well, maybe I'll come along. He's like, okay. So we went to church over at his the little storefront Baptist church that his father was a deacon at. And got involved with the youth group there, had a lot of fun. But I really didn't take any steps forward in my spiritual journey until things started going pretty sour for me. My first job was at a fast food joint, and about 6 months into that job, I made the mistake of breaking the rules, thinking that everybody else was breaking the rules, so why not me too? Well, when everyone got lined up after getting caught and asked who was the one who actually broke the rules, I was the only one who admitted to it. And that meant that within about 3 days I was fired. Even though the rest of them were all just as guilty as I was the one who admitted to it, so therefore I paid the price. Well, getting fired from a fast food joint is pretty much the bottom of the barrel, and when you've already had a lot of self-esteem issues from people picking on you for years and years, and then you blow off pretty much the lowest end of the job scale you can, well, that gets pretty depressing. And so for a 16-year-old boy, I started getting pretty depressed, and I actually remember that this is the only time that ever happened to me, but I remember actually contemplating suicide for one brief moment. I thought to myself, you know what, life sucks so bad, I just want to get rid of this stupid life. I'm done with this. And then I remember distinctly there was like another voice that was inside my head that said to me, what are you thinking? It's not that bad. You got your whole life ahead of you. And it was really not that bad. I just kind of shook my head and I went, how could I even think that? That's weird. And from there, I went back to the church, and I got back involved in the youth group again, and I started thinking about larger things, like who's in control of my life? If I'm in control of my life, I seem to be making a pretty good botch of it. Maybe I should turn it over to somebody who knows a little bit more than me about what's best for me. And so a few months after the firing, I actually got driven home after a youth group meeting with my friend. He had his driver's license by that time. He had his own little truck. He drove me back to his place. I asked him a few more questions, and I just kind of got out of my car and went inside the house. And that night, I prayed to God to forgive me for the things that I'd done wrong, and I asked Him to take over my life because I was obviously making a mess of it myself, and I needed somebody who knew more. And from that moment, and I'd heard stories because obviously when you're in a community like Baptists or like most Protestant groups, you hear about people who get born again, and you hear about these wonderful experiences like zap, a bolt of lightning hits them, or magically all of a sudden they're transformed and they're completely different from the way they used to be. Well, that wasn't me. I kind of prayed that prayer and I thought, nothing's really different. So I kind of went on about my business, and I went to school, and high school was just as sucky as ever, and I was just kind of moving through life again, but I realized that something was different when a few weeks later I heard some people kind of making fun of church at the high school, and I found myself speaking up. From a guy who was bullied, from a guy who did not want to be noticed because it just meant more being picked on, it was really weird for me to suddenly feel like stepping up and out and actually, setting myself up. But it was because I realized in that moment that that prayer that I prayed actually meant something to me. That there was something that had changed in my heart, and that I was different, and my priorities were different, and I didn't care as much about the things I used to care about. And that was the beginning of what I recognize as a transformation. That spring, I actually got baptized along with another friend of mine, and that was a real interesting experience because I was just starting to realize how I'd begun to change. I didn't think I'd changed that much yet, but I had a man who was one of the youth leaders stand up next to me and tell the congregation all about how I had changed so much in the time I'd been in youth. And he talked about all the different things that I was doing that I never did before, and I was struck by it. I was like, who were you talking to? Like, I didn't even realize he was talking about me half the time. But that was what they were seeing, and I couldn't see it for myself as well as they could. So things had begun to change. Now, my journey after that was one of dealing with the fact that I'm 16 years old. I'd just come to understand who Jesus is and who the Lord is in my life. And I'm sitting in a youth group full of kids who were all raised in the church, who knew all the Bible stories back and forth, who knew this Bible back to front, and I didn't. But yet I wanted to. And so I struggled with that for a few years. And shortly after I graduated high school, I made a promise to God that after I finished the tech school training I was doing, that I would go and attend Bible college for a year or two. And so I set out to do that, which took me down to the coast. And that was where I met my wife and my children. And God began taking me on a journey from there. And I can look back on it, and this is the neat thing about the way that God takes you through your life, is that oftentimes while you're going, you don't see the path that you're on. God only seems to let us know a few steps ahead what's going to be coming. Maybe he does that just because he doesn't want us to be scared of just how much change is coming. But looking back, I can see where he had his hand on me, and he was taking me places that I never would have thought I would ever go. And it was because he was guiding my life. And now I'm at a place where I've never thought I would be. I'm doing things that I never thought I would ever do. You talked to me when I was 16 years old, that I would be one day stepping out in faith, moving halfway across the country and starting up a church from scratch by myself. I wouldn't even laugh in your face. I would have just absolutely walked away. That just would have been inconceivable for me. Not even understanding half of what the other kids around me understood. But now, recognizing that it isn't about necessarily head knowledge, it's about heart knowledge, and it's about obedience, and it's about listening to what God has for you, and doing it no matter how scary it really is. And so that's how I found myself in Medicine Hat, planting a church. Thanks.